and welcome to another ship review. Today we are going to be talking about Slicer, Amarr Combat Navy Frigate. Slicer is an important ship for ecosystem in faction warfare because it is one of the most affordable and at the same time strong kiters. You can technically take Kiting Condor, for example, which will be even cheaper, but in most cases you will struggle to kill big targets. And in my experience, it makes sense to take Kiting Condor if you have a couple of friends with you that can help if needed. But with Slicer, you can fly solo, and in most cases, this ship provides enough performance to kill any target that's in your engagement range. Now, as you can see, Slicer is the third most popular frigate in faction warfare. Incidentally, it's also the third most popular Navy combat frigate. So after Comet, Hookbill comes Slicer, and Firetail is in the distant fourth. In terms of win rates, it has a decent performance. 60% win rate is pretty good, but I wouldn't pay too much attention to the win rate of Slicer because this ship is quite difficult to fly. It has a very high skill ceiling, so you can actually make some amazing things happen with Slicer if you know how to fly it well. And at the same time, it can feel like an awful ship if you don't know how to fly it. We will talk about strengths and limitations when we will cover ship profile and feats in more detail. So Slicer has only 2 medium slots, and it has a bonus to optimal range for the guns. It means that Slicer is essentially locked to kiting rolls because it just does not have sufficient control, tank, and damage really to perform well in any other roles, particularly like brawling or scrum kiting. You can very occasionally see brawling Slicers, but these are used mostly as trap feats, and they are not really in the meta. So as you can see, like tank, damage, and control are all not particularly great, but they are good enough for the kiting role. Slicer actually projects very respectable damage at kiting ranges, both with pulses and scorch and with beam lasers. So for kiting rolls, the damage is quite respectable. And as for control, it's the same story. Control is not sufficient for fights in scrum range, but for kiting, it's fine. You have Macro Warp Drive and Warp Disruptor, and since you have 5 low slots, you can put double nano quite easily, and it makes speed and agility acceptable for kiting rolls. The tank is unfortunately almost always, as usual for kiting feats, practically non-existent, but your tank is your speed, agility, and distance kiting. There are 2 main kiting feats that are essentially identical with the exception of high slots. So you have a kiting Slicer with pulses, and you have a kiting Slicer with beams. We will talk about like differences, advantages, and disadvantages a bit later on. For now, I would just want to say that these are fairly evenly distributed, I would say nowadays beam slicers among kiting feeds are a bit more popular than pulse feeds, but they are both perfectly viable. Now, in terms of performance, the biggest issue with slicers, like across the entire engagement profile, is that the slicer is very predictable, and everyone knows that slicer will try to kite in the vast majority of situations, and it makes engaging out of position quite tricky against frigates, because essentially you need to be fast enough to escape scrums on the warping. And if you are in position, people simply will not engage you in something that has an afterburner fitted. And it leads to kind of deflated win rates because the biggest issue, or one of the biggest issues with Slicer, is not really the fight itself, but the ability to set up a fight in favorable situations. Once you engage in a fight and the situation is favorable, Slicer is actually very difficult to kill. But the issue is, how do you get into this position when everyone knows that you are going to kite on? So on average, your engagement profile will include all Navy frigates, all Tech 1 frigates and Tech 1 destroyers, and you can also engage Navy destroyers as well. So if Navy destroyer has long-range guns fitted, it generally means that Slicer cannot win, because it doesn't have mitigation with electronic warfare. But against Navy destroyers with short-range guns, Slicer is perfectly viable. It generally comes down to can you manage your cap to grind through all of the hit points of a Navy destroyer before you run out of cap. Okay, so as I mentioned, you have two ways to fit a kiting slicer, one with pulses and the other with beams. Let's start with a pulse slicer. This is more suitable for beginners than the beam slicer, but it has its own disadvantages. So we fit these two largest pulse lasers in high slots, MWD plus Warp Disruptor in medium slots, and double heatsink, double nano, and ancillary rep in low slots. Rigs are full optimal range. To extend your optimal range to be in line with Warp Disruptor range. This is basically the only way to fit a kiting slicer. You must prioritize damage and speed plus agility over tank and cap. Some people fit like a damage control, or some people fit capacitor modules. Do not do that. This is the way to fit a kiting slicer, because speed and DPS are more important than everything else. Now, what's the biggest advantage of this fit is that you have very high DPS for kiter, at least for Navy frigate or Tech 1 frigate kiter. 164, this is before heat, and you also have a near perfect tracking at Warp Disruptor range. So this is like a very high DPS kiter that allows you to kill frigates and destroyers quite quickly. And you need to do it quickly because you are extremely limited on cap. So this is with perfect skills. You have only 1 minute and 10 seconds for cap, and this is without running your ancillary rep. The ancillary rep for a slicer is not actually for tanking during the fight, it's generally for repairing when you're away from taking any damage. This can be on grid if you just burn away, or this can be like mid warp, you just repair a little bit, but you don't generally repair during the fight. So it means that against more tanky targets, you need to manage your cap somehow. And it generally means, since you can't shut down your guns and you can't turn off your Warp Disruptor because the target will just warp out, it means that you need to kind of manage your micro warp drive. So do not run it constantly, like run it only when you need to. This is a difficult part. In general, kiting slicers are not easy to fly, and as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, it takes a lot of skill and practice to actually extract a maximum performance out of slicer. Now the alternative is to feed beams. The feed is essentially the same, you just replace process with beams. There are a couple of pros and cons for this feed. The main advantage is that you get much larger range, which is very, very useful when you need to clear the grid a little bit before committing to Warp Disruptor range. For example, here you get 28 kilometers with X-ray, and you can go as high as your entire lock range at 50 kilometers with Aurora. With Pulse Slicer, you're limited to essentially like 25 kilometers, 26, 27 kilometers with Frantics and perfect skills. The second advantage is that you get higher DPS. So even with X-ray, as you can see, you go up to 176 compared to 164 for Pulse Fit. And this is not even the highest DPS crystals what you can use. But there are a couple of disadvantages. The first one is that your tracking is significantly worse. With Pulse Slicer, you don't really worry about tracking at all. You just can click orbit and shoot, and your application will be near perfect anyways. With Beam Slicer, you actually need to be mindful of your transversal, because against frigates, especially frigates with afterburners, you will not apply full damage if you just fly around your target. The second disadvantage is that your cap is even worse. So here you can see it's 1 minute 5 seconds, and with different crystals it can be even worse. So for example, if I switch to like Gamma, for example, with Gamma it drops to 60 seconds. With multi-frequency it drops to 56 seconds, and so on. So you need to manage your cap in this feed even more when you need to manage it with Pulse Slicer. So in general, beam slicers are more difficult to fly, but you can get more performance out of them if you fly them perfectly. This is the trade-off essentially. Next, I mentioned that occasionally you will see brawling slicers. There are a whole bunch of different feeds. I will just show you a general idea. It does not need to be exactly like this, your feed, but the general idea is that you try to feed the maximum damage, and when you kind of compensate the remaining feed around the tank and control. So this is the feed that I would prefer, because you get probably the maximum possible damage out of a brawling slicer, and you get pretty decent control, so you can apply this damage quite well. The only problem, of course, is that you don't have a tackle, but you're hoping that your opponent will think that he just scrummed a chitin slicer and it's about to be a free kill. You can adjust this feed in many ways. You can feed scrum, of course, but if you feed a scrum when you will struggle with tracking, you can replace beams with pulses to mitigate the issues with tracking, but when your damage will be and range will be significantly worse, you can feed a plate, 400mm plate instead of ancillary rep, and when you get more hit points, but when your control will be significantly worse, and so on. There are a bunch of different modifications depending on what exactly do you want to prioritize. I feel like with brawling slicers, you generally want to prioritize DPS. Secondly, you prioritize control to apply with DPS, and when everything else is kind of not that important. But as I said, you can just adjust them. But brawling slicers are very rare. You just need to keep in mind that this feat is possible, but in the vast majority of cases, when you see a slicer on grid, it will be either beam kiting or pulse kiting feats. Okay, I hope you found it useful. Slicer is an amazing kiting frigate with a lot of potential if you know how to extract it. So just fly it, try to get better. The ship is very cheap for performance what it offers. You end up with something like 25 million ISK. So I suggest just buy like 10 of them and fly around, record your fights, and try to get better. Okay, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next ship review.